All right, can everybody hear me? Excellent. Good morning. Thank you for coming. The topics today that we're going to talk about are faster, better, cheaper. Pick two because you can't have everything. Looking at this is an AIA continuing education session. There's also a review that you can fill out. Go onto the app and rate the presentation and the speakers. It would be much appreciated. Let's get into the presentation. From a learning perspective, I'm going to cover a lot of material today, so I'll probably move rather quickly. As we're talking about surface prep, we're talking about mortars, and we're also talking about grouts, each one a topic in itself. But looking at what are the changes in the products today related to the applications and the reasons that the products have made changes over the years. So we'll talk about today's building practices. We'll talk about today's tile trends, the challenges on the job site. We will tie it in with the TCNA and the ANSI guidelines associated with those situations, and then we'll look at some of the products in the arena that us and other manufacturers make. To begin with, to me, substrate product preparation is key. If the preparation isn't done properly, the rest of the installation is challenged. Especially when you're looking at going into large format tile and tile panels. The contractors will tell you that it's best to address the preparation to begin with to make the installation much smoother and more efficient. Let's look at substrate preparations and some of the challenges that have happened recently over the years. Tile continue to get larger and larger. I mean, you can have tile that are 4 foot by 4 foot in size. Other trends that are challenging from an installation perspective are the plank tile or rectangle tile, and you're looking at, there's also more issues with lippage in those type of installations than there are in the other smaller tile. And then again, in today's world, there's an increased demand upon productivity and shorter time frames in reference to the actual preparation and installation. The other scenario that turns into a challenge are gauged tile or porcelain tile panels. Some of the properties, they're as much as 5 feet to 3 inches wide by as much as 10 feet to 6 inches long. So the tile panels are a challenging installation scenario. The other side that makes it difficult is that many of the tile are rectified or they've got square edges. And the substrates need to be much flatter when you're looking at a large panel because you need the coverage behind them to have the support so that you don't have issues with cracking, chipping, or spalling later. And to complicate it, the grout joints are getting narrower. One of the challenges with rectangular tile is warpage. Warpage in reference to a tile, there's a specification and a standard set for it, so we know it exists, but it's an installation challenge on the job site because if you don't do it in an offset pattern, it magnifies the scenario and becomes a challenge later for the installation when it's finished. What are some of the other problems that you have from a tile side is you're looking at various tile thicknesses are a challenge in reference to install and avoid the lippage. We talked about the warpage and then the substrate flatness. You'll see if you don't have the substrate flat to begin with, later you run into the challenges that are magnified when the installation is complete. One of the common problems that's noticed later, many times when you're doing the installation, lighting is very poor, if at all, and you're looking at a scenario where it's very, very popular in bathrooms where you have the lighting shining down on the tile installation afterwards. Thus, it causes the appearance that you're seeing here where you've got the wall wash look or the wall grazing challenge. So that's always one to take into consideration and plan for. The other is the reflectance of the surface is going to magnify any problem that you're going to encounter. Just to touch on, there are standards in the industry. This happens to be the standard, and I would make myself aware of this in the handbook. It details out the lippage that's acceptable in the installation based upon the size of the tile, the grout joint, and the thickness. So there are variants, and it's one that you're going to want to be aware of and refer back to as a resource. The next is the ANSI standard, which also has a standard related to acceptable lippage for tile installation. And if we look at the detail in particular in reference to the ANSI standard, it details out that for the tile, they must have one edge at least 15 inch or longer, no more than 1/8 inch in 10 feet. If you're looking at it from a perspective of a 2-foot area, no more than 1/16 of an inch variance. Wall applications, ANSI also applies to the wall application, and it's a common problem in the industry related to drywall being out of skew or cement board. So it's a common problem that needs to be addressed with surface preparation and cannot be addressed with the actual tile setting material itself. Looking at quickly to touch on the products that are designed nowadays to address these, we have a category of 4 different types of products. We have self-leveling underlayments, we have the modified mud beds, we have fast setting modified mud beds, and then there are fast setting render coat type of products. So this is the technology of products that has changed over the last 5 or 10 years to address the installation problems associated with large format tile or especially with engaged porcelain tile panels. Looking at the self-leveling underlayment, many of them are high strength, and there's a variety of different types of products. There's fast setting products, there's slower setting products, there's products that go from 1/2 inch up to 3 inches. So the perspective would be to align and select the product associated with the timing of the installation and the demands of the installation that you're looking to achieve as far as flatness in the end surface prep. There's also modified mud bed products that can be used as a bonded or an unbonded installation method. There are fast setting products, and then there are the slower setting products. But what the manufacturers provide are the factory blended version, as opposed to traditional sand and cement mixed on the job site. These products are manufactured and ready to use, and they come polymer modified or non-modified, depending upon your selection and your need in that particular application. There's also the fast setting modified sloping mortar beds, which have come into the marketplace in the last couple of years because the push is to reduce the amount of time taken in that installation and to turn it over to setting tile and waterproofing quicker. So these products can set in as little as 1 hour or 2 hours, and then they can be waterproofed in an hour after that. And it's really designed for the efficiency and the turnaround of the job site to get to the tile and finish the installation quicker. There's also fast setting mortar render coats that are designed for the applications primarily on the wall. They can be like the typical scratch and brown coat type of applications where you're looking at truing the wall, and in this case they also have fast setting versions as well as the slower setting versions. What I want to move into now is the next section, which are mortars. So we've covered the surface prep. Now we're going to touch on the mortar side of it and look at today's modern mortars and their connection with the installation related to tile. You're looking at, and I'm going to talk about a new standard that's been introduced, the 118.15, which is a standard for premium mortars, and then we'll talk about the H designation later. But I wanted to touch briefly on the difference between ANSI and ISO and why you should be concerned, and the key points of what you need to know in reference to those to better understand which product to use for which application. Then we're going to discuss the new standard, the H designation, which is designed for the large format tile. And then we'll talk about the large and heavy tile challenges that you have on the job site and why those products were developed to address those individual challenges. To begin with the standards, there's the 118.1, which is the unmodified. There's the 118.4, which is the modified. And then you look at moving into the 118.11, which is if you're going over plywood. That's the only standard that applies to as an installation directly bonded to plywood. But we'll spend most of our time on the 118.15, which is the improved mortar standard, the premium products, and we'll discuss the differences and the reasons for that premium category of products. Previously, the 118.4 was used as a standard for all latex modified mortars. The challenge it had is that there is a broad spectrum of products that fit within the 118.4. So the specification from the architectural point of view may not be carried through to the installation because you're looking at specifying a premium product that's a 118.4, but there are lower grade products that meet that specification. So your spec may not be kept because of the category limitations previously. So with that, the 118.15 was created to be able to specify and carry through premium products to the actual application. What has changed with that is there's a new high performance standard related to bond strengths, and also there's a test that's related to heat aging, which we'll discuss briefly. But to understand the standards and how those test numbers you look at that are on a technical data sheet, they're really based upon ANSI testing requirements. And all manufacturers are required to follow the ANSI procedure to get those numbers so that you're looking at the actual performance of that product and you have a value to look at and rate on it. If you look at how it's done, you would take a 2x2 porcelain tile, bond it glaze to glaze on an offset pattern, and you would put an 1/8 of an inch mortar between them. This machine here is an Instrom equipment which shears the product. So that's where you get your values from. It's connected to a computer so that you run a certain number of tests, and it gives you a range of performance of that particular product. But that's the numbers you're looking at, whether you're specifying it or whether you're meeting a spec of performance. It's done according to the ANSI testing. What is different with the new standard is that it has a heat aging test associated with it. So it has additional test requirements compared to the original 118.4, and it also has a higher shear strength, where with porcelain it requires up to 450 psi. One of the standards is actually doubled from where it is with the 118.4. So it ties into where would I use a product like this? Or where would I need a premium product? The premium products are really called for in situations where you're doing exterior applications, whether it be vertical, whether it be balconies, in situations where you have rain, you have snow, you have freeze thaw. You may in the morning wake up and it's a mountain environment and it's 40 degrees. In the afternoon it's 80 degrees and the sun is shining on a dark tile, and it's actually more like 120. So you're looking at a lot of expansion and contraction, and that is the environment where the premium products were designed for and developed to address. This is a quick look. What you'll see in the yellow, these are the new specs that were created and associated with the 118.15. It looks at the new higher shear numbers that are required from that product. It also details out the heat age testing, which was not there in previous test performance. Then there's also the ISO standard. The ISO standard to me is unique because it does some things that are not capable in the ANSI testing. ANSI testing, as we talked about, is shear. ISO tests for deformability. It actually is a tensile pull, so the test is more repeatable. The numbers are much truer in regards to the test from a global perspective, so that everybody can test products worldwide under the same qualifications. But the one thing that it does that ANSI doesn't do is the deformability. If you ask what's deformability, imagine you've got a mall area with a second-story cement installation, and you've got continual walking on that. You can feel the bounce when you're walking on it. That's deformability. And that's what ISO tests for that ANSI does not. ANSI is a pure shear, which would be expansion and contraction. But when you're looking at an ideal installation, I would look at both ISO and ANSI testing so that you can take into effect every type of movement that installation will be subjected to. The other things that you would look at when you're looking at mortars, you've got an E, which is an extended open time, which is the working time the contractor has after he trials the product to be able to set the tile and get the transfer to the back of the tile. So it's important on a job site because in the lab everything is tested at 70 degrees, 50% relative humidity, which is a beautiful world that never happens in the field. So he may have an environment where there's a lot of circulation, the windows aren't in yet, you've got dry air coming through, so he may not get that 20 minutes. So the premium products with the longer working time are an advantageous scenario to the contractor to help him get the coverage he needs to support the tile so he doesn't have issues with bonding, cracking, or other related issues. We'll talk about the H, which is the new standard for large and heavy tile. But basically the advantage from a tile contractor's perspective, the advantages of the premium mortar is it gives competitive bidders the same scenario where they're all bidding premium quality products, where before we talked about the 118.4 and a wide range of products, so you could have a contractor bidding the product on the low end and one on the high end. This one, you know you've got a product that's a premium performing product and everyone's bidding similarly. It also gives you better use of tile and mortar characteristics, and you're more confident that what has been specified is actually being used on the job site. Let's look at large and heavy tile mortar. The advantages of them: they're non-slump, they're non-sag. They have the ability to build from 3/32 up to a ½ inch in thickness. Now, none of these products are designed to level your floor. There was a confusion years ago where they were called medium beds, and the assumption was, oh, you can level the floor or set a floor with a medium bed. As we talked earlier, leveling needs to be a separate surface prep application, and it's not done by the mortar because the mortars, although they have the ability to be set at a thicker thickness, they're not designed to level the floor. Looking at the TCNA handbook, looking at how large and heavy tile is defined, the key points are it minimizes slump, it can be used as a thicker bond coat, and it has an ANSI H designation to it. So the difference between a regular dry set and a large and heavy tile mortar is defined by the embedded thickness that is approved for that mortar. And when you look at embedded thickness, to get a ½ inch per se, you would use a 1 inch square notch trowel, because when it's compressed, that would be a ½ inch of embedded thickness product. So the products are capable to build higher than that ½ inch in a troweled application, but from the specification, this is the detail related to that. Also, there are lightweight mortars out there nowadays that are both fast setting as well as regular setting. They combine a new technology. They got some recycled properties to them. They do not contain silica added because they're a glass bead type of filler where they have a glass spherical additives instead of having the silica sand in them. It also reduces the weight of the product, where many of them it's half the weight and the same volume of coverage. Of, say, a 25-pound will cover what a 50-pound bag does because of that technology. You're also looking at it's a very fine particles that are used, which makes it contractor friendly because it's easier to trowel and work. Let's look at grouts as our final segment and talk about the advances in the grout business that are aligned with today's building practices, how they affect the grouts and the technology of the grouts. We'll look at the job site challenges and their impact upon grouts, and then we'll talk about how grout is driving design changes, and also discuss the properties of the different grouts and how they meet the needs of the installation community. Let's look at modern building practices as it relates to grout. Flooring contractors are always pushed to finish the job. Usually by the time the flooring contractor gets there, the job's already 1 week behind, and they're looking for the contractor to make up the time, which becomes very much of a challenge. You're looking at many times having to work around plumbers or carpenters or drywallers, and you're also looking at finishing up the scenario, the contractors before you, dealing with their punch list and wanting to have traffic or access to the areas that you need to keep traffic off of for the period of time for the mortar to set and the grout to not have problems. So you're looking at what are these trends in the tile that also affect the grout. The same trends that affect the surface prep products and the mortars really affect the grout as well, and change the technology that we've had over the years of addressing the grouts. But you're looking at standard, it's not unusual to have a 4x4 tile nowadays. You're looking at the rectangular and plank tiles, the rectified, and you also have the cement tile nowadays is very much a popular trend. And these are challenges that not only affect the mortar, but they affect the grout and the curing and the application processes associated with it. And then glass, it's completely popular nowadays, but it has its limitations in reference to installation products and concerns in reference to grouting associated with not having any scratches or anything that is going to be a blemish noticed later. So let's look at the demands of the grout. The same thing is there. You're looking for increased productivity when the contractor is on the job site, but also from an aesthetic perspective, the homeowner is much more, or even commercial, is much more interested in stain and chemical resistance with today's grouts than they were in the past. The lippage is a problem with the grout. Many times the lippage is not noticed until you grout, because the grouting actually magnifies the appearance of the lippage. That prior to grouting, you may have thought everything looks good because you're not seeing the lippage at that point because the grout makes it obvious. So you're looking at challenges as far as grout cleanup. Anytime you're looking for productivity and pushing crews and they're looking to get it done quicker, all of that is working against the grout products or the standard Portland cement type of grouts that were used in the past. And typically the job site conditions are less than ideal in reference to the temperature and the other elements or the lighting. And then you've always got the fact that many job sites have limited access to clean water. What that means is if the contractor doesn't have the ability to frequently change his wash water, then he's going to run into challenges in the cleanup phase that would not have been encountered if he were able to clean his water and not try to stretch the water cleanup related to the issue. Let's touch on some of the grouts that are out there. The new technology is the single component. It comes in a variety of different versions. There's acrylic, there's urethane, and then there's hybrid type technologies that are out there from the different manufacturers. They can be commercial, they can be residential in application, it can be interior, exterior, wet areas to a certain degree. You'll want to check with your manufacturer in reference to the limitations they may have on wet areas with products like that. But you're looking at things like colored quartz that give a better color to it, a more consistent color, a little better workability properties. They also have chemical and stain resistance to a degree. There's not a current standard for these products, and that's where the industry always, as trends change and things change within the industry, the standards usually follow. So the committees work on developing standards, but the products are always developed to address the needs prior to the standards being implemented in the industry. They've got some crack and shrinkage control, and also they're not prone to the efflorescence. They'll have joints from 1/16 inch to a 1/2 inch, so they're looking at products that are both wall and floor in nature. From a tile installation perspective, they cover the gamut of the type of tile that are capable of being installed. And then you have products that they don't have any seal requirements. They have a good grout appearance. Touch on calcium aluminum cement are the fast setting type of cement technologies. They go from 1/16 to 3/4 inch. They're good for submerged application. They don't have efflorescence because of the type of technology that you're using and the fast set perspective. They cover the gamut of tile as well that you're looking at. Then you're looking at the fine aggregate products that gives you the better appearance and some workability property enhancements. So in summary, I would say that the tile installers and the industry is driven by innovation that relates to the substrates as well as the changes in tile, and the manufacturers of the mortars, underlayments, rendering products, and grouts are reacting to the demands of the industry from the change of the substrate, from the change of the tile, and from the needs of the contractor to pull that together to develop the products to match with the systems that are being installed. So from what we've seen quickly today, the consideration is whether it's a surface prep, whether it's a mortar, or whether it's a grout. Those are the considerations to take into effect when you're making your selection as to which product that you would like to use. So that concludes the presentation. I'll take any questions if anyone's got any questions. Yes, sir.
Is there you mentioned lippage and the grout sometimes could make it obvious.
Yes.
Is there ever a scenario where the grout helps mitigate the lippage with less of a slip or less of a visual?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, the grout is not able to cover the lippage itself. It just it makes it more obvious because when the grout space is open, you can't see the height variance. But once it's grouted, it becomes extremely noticeable because the grout a lot of times is not flush in that area, and it's not able to be tooled properly.
Is the standard no lippage? I mean, is there a tolerance for lippage?
There is a tolerance for lippage. Briefly, we had shown a spec for ANSI and also for the TCNA. And in the handbook of the TCNA and the ANSI spec, they have a detail as to how much lippage is acceptable on the installation. And it's going to vary depending upon the type of tile you use, the width of the grout joint, and that all takes into effect what is acceptable. Okay, I've got to end here. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance. Thank you.